Hi, everyone. I'm Louisa from the GoldFish Report. I put out a notice earlier this week that I would be making a public statement today regarding the silencing of Winston Shrout. And I will be doing that right now. And joining me to also give his point of view is our friend Scott Werner to be here with me to do this. Thank you, Scott. How are you?
You're welcome. I'm really good. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today because it's needed to be known.
Okay. So I have a prepared statement that I'm going to read, and I want to, preface this by saying that I'm not trying to make a statement to make, um, anybody happy. You might or might not like what I have to say, but as Scott said, it has to be said. Um, so I'm making this statement entirely as a representative of the GoldFish Report. And as you know, at the GoldFish Report, we do research. We're research media, and we do analysis of media and stories as well. Um, and so I am not a spokesperson for Winston or his solutions in commerce business. I make this statement entirely of my own creation and without Winston's knowledge or approval of its content. The only comment Winston has made to me personally was that he doesn't need defending. This is the separation of the sheep and the goats. People need to take personal responsibility for themselves. I had no knowledge of this matter during the course of recording our Educational Country Roads reports until recently, when insiders privy to the proceedings began making comments on our reports in the public comment section, divulging details of the proceedings that were under seal. It seems to me that there was a malicious and unlawful act only meant to embarrass or disparage Winston. Little did I know that was only a sample of the malignant force that sought to silence him. The saying, knowledge is power, is an understatement. To most seeking to understand our world, knowledge helps one navigate life far better than those who are ignorant or without knowledge. But to those powers and forces that seek to impose draconian debt slavery on this planet, knowledge is seen as a weapon that can strike them down. Thus, to evildoers, certain knowledge is a threat that must be extinguished. As reported on Monday in the local OregonLive.com article, Winston was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison claiming failure to pay taxes, being sovereign political status, and creating financial instruments. I wondered why a case about a dispute of income taxes would be sealed when most are not. I know Winston has said he doesn't make very much money as to a retired person, so the amount in dispute could not have been anything excessive. And if everyone who had a dispute about income taxes was sentenced to 10 years in prison, then there would be no one left to run the government or corporations, would there? In my opinion, it appears that income taxes is the cover charge for the ensuing lynching that not only sought to silence him, but to destroy his livelihood and end his life in prison. Why would a federal court so viciously attack a man that we all come to know and love in a grandfatherly way? A man who is kind, honest, sincere, with integrity. A man whose brilliance discovered the mechanics of our financial tyranny system and sought to lawfully free himself from his fiction slave status, and then helped to educate others. A man who was given an appointment to act in a manner to resolve the home foreclosure fraud committed by the bankers and the Federal Reserve. As of 1933, the Federal Reserve created a charter, was chartered, and they had created, let me get this right. The Fed had leased 2.4 million metric tons of gold for their bonds and currency. The contract called for 4% annual fee, but the Fed had never paid it since the contract of 1933. So Winston put a commercial lien against the Federal Reserve. But that's not all. Next, he went to the IMF, and so he had them in commercial dishonor, which is commercial death. If anybody, and of all people, Winston knew the commercial world very, very good. He also managed to bring commercial death to the Northern Trust Corporation, which is the holding company for the privately owned IRS, the Bar, and the Jesuits, and the IMF/UN. Shortly after that, Winston's office was raided and his computer seized, and the lynching began. Those are just facts, folks. I'm just putting facts on the table. Winston had stated on our educational videos how he was involved in creating this commercial lien that put the Federal Reserve in commercial dishonor. And by doing so, this prevented the Fed from rechartering and thus paved the way for Trump to fulfill his promise to end the Fed. So this is what the facts were. I think we are beginning to see what this vicious case was really about. Threat to power. The people were becoming self-empowered through his technology. Abuse of power, revenge, and retaliation. Simply put, in my opinion, Winston was a threat to the powers that be. He was educating people on emancipating themselves from the Babylonian debt slavery system. He taught how to navigate within the system of commerce, not how to get out of the system, which ignorant people might think that's what he was doing. But he never did. In fact, Winston was always short to criticize the commerce system. And he said, whether you like it or not, this is the system and this is how it operates. And that's what he taught. He knew how to put the financial criminals into a commercial dishonor so the system could change and the people could have more prosperity and a better quality of life. Winston takes full and complete responsibility for his actions. This reminds me of a story that I've seen somewhere before, Scott, and you can comment on it as you will. The similarities, and this is just an allegory, and we know how often Winston used allegories to explain a lot of the concepts between the King James Version of the Bible and our commercial code system. The similarities are far too uncanny to ignore. We have the story of Jesus entering the temple on the eve of Passover to find the marketeers and money changers in a sacred house of worship, taking advantage of the poor who traveled from out of town to partake in a Passover worship. Is it not the same story, but almost 2,000 years later? Do we not still have money changers, bankers taking advantage of people through their mortgage fraud or single rather than double ledger accounting? Was Winston's commercial lien not turning over the tables of the money changers or bankers as we know them today? Is Winston's teachings not unlike the teachings of Jesus in the threat to the Babylonian financial debt system? Is it not Herod and the Roman Empire who felt the threat? And what did they decide to do? Didn't the Roman Empire accuse Jesus of blasphemy, of being something or someone with some kind of ability or authority that threatened them and challenged them? And so too, as in this article that I'm going to highlight in just a moment, where this article from OregonLive.com was trying to really ridicule and disparage Winston, say he thought he had powers or abilities. He thought he was something and had something or something special, had some authority to do these things. It didn't. So, I mean, I just see the parallels so uncanny with Jesus that it's not funny, really. You can't ignore it. Is the claim against Winston that he had grandiose ideas of himself, as I just said, not the same as Jesus? Like Jesus, who stood before Pontius Pilate and was convicted of wrongdoing, so was Winston. And like Jesus, whose disciple Judas betrayed him for 30 silver coins, that he would help himself to on occasion. Judas, that is. We have Judge Anna von Reitz, who published a story about Winston this week that had no factual basis whatsoever, but seemed more like an advertisement or invitation to recruit Winston's followers who may be looking for more education material. The similarities are far too uncanny and make us realize that the Romans still run the world, that we are slaves until the day we die, that dissenters are silenced to keep the globalists in power. Did you really think that they would create a system that was about justice for you, or enforcement of draconian laws to protect their power and control? You decide, and always take full responsibility for yourself and your actions. I was very disheartened to see this article by Judge Anna von Reitz. Whether she's a judge or not, I don't know for sure. I know that she has sought counsel from Winston. Personally, she had his phone number. She could have called him. But to make allegations assuming that Winston himself did not follow through with the technology that he was teaching only makes me wonder that there was some other motivation involved. Was she trying to save her own butt? Was she trying to recruit his, try to impress his followers with her detailed analysis of all the things that he should have done that apparently he didn't do, according to Judge Anna von Reitz? I can assure you he did all of that and far more than Judge Anna even is aware of or even knows about. So I can only tell you that this really played out it's very biblical. It's just it's repeated over and over and over again, that when you're a threat to the powers that be, they will silence you. And I want you to take that, and I want you to take responsibility for your actions, as we all take responsibility for our own. And having said that, I wanted to ask Scott if he wanted to comment on that. Since we've all, Scott and I have both also been before Pontius Pilates of our day, wrongfully accused of things because we were a threat. And we're hoping to see this come to an end. We are hoping to see that there will be some sort of resolution to this that will be graceful to Winston, because in my opinion, he didn't deserve this. And I think it was a miscarriage of justice. So thank you for listening. And Scott, did you want to make some comments? I'm sorry, I need to unmute you. And as soon as I do that, you can make your comments. Go ahead.
I'm going to start with a little story about what happened to me. Back in 1996, I was praying for the best herbalist on the planet to come teach me about the herbs. I was doing herbal medicine, but I had been medically trained and never officially trained in herbal medicine, homeopathics, crystal energies, etc. So I was praying very hard, and this man appeared by the name of Steve Henenfent. He told me to open up an herb store and he'd teach me about the herbs. And I had developed a reputation for helping people get well using the herbs. I'd actually cured my own cancer using herbal remedies, chelation therapy, homeopathics. And I wanted to know more. And this man came into my life and taught me more. The people would come in and I'd diagnose them with a diagnosis. I'd tell them, okay, this is the traditional medical treatment. And I'd tell them, if they came in with a UTI, I'd tell them, okay, we can treat it with antibiotics, or we can treat it with herbs so you don't develop antibiotic resistance and all this stuff. And I would take him in the herb shop, and Steve Henenfent would show me what herbs to use to treat the UTI or whatever problem it was I had diagnosed. And I learned about these herbs. And people got well without using pharmaceuticals. And I continued this, and literally the hospital sought to remove me from the staff of the hospital because they said I was using unproven techniques and therapeutics, even though I was having great success with these things. And so basically they started fighting against me and telling the powers that be, the state of Utah and the state medical board, they started filing things with the FDA. And it was really interesting. I started having to fight for my life as a medical doctor. And as you know, we're in a big, huge opioid crisis. Well, the opioid crisis has been going on for years and years and years. I mean, I was treating a city full of heroin addicts back in the 1980s. And then cocaine got brought on the scene by guess who? Our CIA, and the government was making money off of these cocaine addicts. And they make money off of the opioid addicts. And here they come and they attack the doctors that are actually trying to do things to reduce this. I actually learned about pain management and was trying to help these addicts reduce the quantities of opioids and use herbal remedies that help them relieve their pain. And because of these things, I started getting attacked. And the state first made me come and learn about opioids. You know, they mandated I had to attend a court session with opioids. And so they put me on suspension for even being able to prescribe them without going through another doctor. And all the doctors I went through were like, oh yeah, that's okay, this guy's got pain, you can prescribe him opioids, you know. And I had to give a list of all the people I was giving opioids to, and mine was much less than some of the other guys practicing medicine. The fact is, I know it was, because they kept saying, well, you're giving much less quantities than we are. And because I was trying to manage them and get them off the opioids, whereas the rest of the medical profession, they just didn't have time to talk with the people and help them adjust. And so this went on, and I ended up getting charged by the state for distributing too many opioids, which was interesting because I know there was 16 practitioners in Cedar City, and they singled me out. But they singled me out because I was not a part of the brotherhood. I had quit going to the meetings at the hospital. I had quit attending their sovereignty over me, you know, as the AMA, the state medical board. And so it ended up that Medicare started trying to back sue me for seeing patients who had been given painkillers legitimately. And I won that lawsuit, which was civil. And then they came after me criminally. And instead of, you know, allowing me to have my day in court, the federal marshal showed up and literally locked my doors, kicked all of us out, ransacked my office, went through all my computers, stole all my hardware and, hard drives, and tried to prove I had committed crimes. And it was quite interesting because, you know, in order to commit a crime, you have to have witnesses. Well, all my patients they went to said, no, Dr. Werner didn't do anything wrong. In fact, he got me well. And then they said, well, if you don't testify against Dr. Werner, we're going to take away your Medicare benefits, your Medicaid benefits, your Social Security benefits, all your government benefits. They threatened these people if they didn't lie and testify against me. Well, all of them said, you guys can go to grass because he did not do anything wrong. He actually helped me heal. And this went on and on. And after they had closed down my building and locked the doors, I couldn't go back in. And so I had to move my practice down to St. George, Utah. And when I came down to St. George, you know, I was being investigated daily. They had my phones tapped. They had, you know, they were listening in, and even in my conversation, my private conversations with patients. And I warned the patients, look, I know they've got us tapped and they're listening in, and even the phone conversations, etc. Well, somehow Winston showed up in my life, and started teaching me about the real system and about commerce. And it was quite fascinating. And he introduced me to people who were doing their sovereignty and trying to get out of the slave system. And I did everything. I even became sovereign. And all that did was piss off the federal government more. And so they showed up at my office and cuffed me and shackled me and threw me in the back of a van and drove me off to the local county jail. And then they took me up to ADC, which is the Adult Detention Center up in Salt Lake City. And I had a couple of days in court, but the judge was totally not listening to any of our pleas. He wasn't listening to any of the factual evidence. And because he wasn't listening, he told us we could no longer plead our case. And Winston was helping me with those pleas. And so we put in a plea that he was wrong in saying we couldn't plead our case, because under the Constitution, you can plead till the sun goes down and comes up again, because that's your right. But then, because we put that next plea in, he put me into what they call, they put everybody in for? Now, I'll think of it here in a sec, but he told me I had gone against the court and threw me in that day. And I started what they call diesel therapy, where they transfer you from jail to jail to jail. And they didn't allow me any typewriter. They didn't allow me any instruments. They didn't allow me anything to plead my case, because the judge denied me doing anything. And so they threw me in, and I met many other very fine medical doctors while I was in the system who they had done the same thing to. And I marveled that all of them hadn't had their day in court. And one of them had been in there 12 years and had not had his day in court. He was usually getting old and dying in jail, and had not had the opportunity to have his day in court, because they had no intent of letting him have his day in court, because he would have won, especially with the jury. You know, they would have looked at him and gone, geez, this guy didn't do anything wrong. So anyway, as I sat in jail, being unable to get the herbs myself, my cancer recurred and I was dying. And it was quite fascinating, because I was praying and praying and praying, and Jesus appeared to me, and he told me I would have to make a deal with the devil. I would have to admit to wrongdoing, even though I hadn't done anything wrong, in order to keep my life. And so Jesus told me they'd want my medical license, so I'd have to give that up. They couldn't take it from me because they couldn't get any witnesses to say I'd done anything wrong or hurt them, because I'd actually helped them be cured and healed. And pay a hefty fine. They already took everything I had. And so, you know, I was destitute and had no money to pay lawyers, because the lawyers had taken all the little money I had left. And pay a hefty fine and be on probation and, you know, do whatever they told me to do. And so I called up my wife and I told her that. And later they called and said, are you really willing to do this? And I said yes, because there was no way. I was dying in prison. I was probably 2 months away from being dead. I was pretty bad off. And so they let me out, and I admitted to one count of Medicare fraud, which was a charge of $38.52. And with that one count, the penalties, fines, and interest were $180,000, which they expected me to pay back very quickly. And I had no way to make money, because I had no medical license anymore, because I voluntarily relinquished my license because they couldn't take it away But in order to get my freedom, I had to agree to that. So as you see, our judicial system is difficult at best, enslaves us at the worst. And a lot of times the worst things happen. But I'm here to tell you that I was very angry. And when I got out, I had to go through tremendous amount of healing to get rid of that anger. I was a patriot. I love this country. And, you know, I had St. Germain teaching me that the Constitution is the most important thing that's going to help the whole planet. And, you know, I had received all these teachings, and yet my government had become something that it really wasn't. And truthfully, we were not running as a constitutional republic. We were running as a military industrial complex. And the corporations, the pharmaceutical industry, has all of our representatives, all our senators tied to that. And they get tied to it even worse when they get elected. And so if you watch how they vote in accordance to what they have been dictated to vote. And they've been threatened with their lives, their families, you know, just like I was. I mean, literally, my life meant nothing to them. They just assumed I died in prison. But luckily, Jesus taught me how to get out and work with the system, which is a very corrupted system. And so the reason I'm bringing this up was Winston came in and gave me hope. And when I got out, he gave me hope. And we became great friends. And I trusted this man very much. He is one of the few people born on the planet who is actually willing to fight for a better system. And so just know that's my viewpoint of Winston. And I love the man, and I'm very grateful I was introduced to him. And I know it was divine that I was introduced to him. So anyway, sorry to get all choked up, but things happen. And we need to pray. We need to manifest that he be freed. We need to manifest that all of those enslaved, there's not just Winston in there, there's many, many patriots enslaved in the system. 1/10 of Americans have felonies now because of the court system. And they could come gather us up, put us in these holding units and gas us for all we know. And because we are the free thinkers, we are the ones who are trying to free America again. And St. Germain wants us to go back to a constitutional republic, not become a socialist state, because all that'll do is enslave all of you more. You know, they're emotionally charging us with the energy that our government needs to become socialist, because they're the constant barrage of the media telling us how wrong we are about this, how wrong we are about that. And the truth of the matter is, if we become socialist, we won't be able to help the world. We'll become a third world country and be enslaved even further. So just know the facts are the facts. If we're a constitutional republic again, we'll be able to be that beacon to the world and free the entire world from the tyranny that has taken over.
Thanks, Scott. That was very well spoken and very emotional. And
yeah, I'm sorry I got so emotional, but it's an emotional subject. I'm emotionally charged up a little bit.
That's okay.
But I hope it's a righteous charge. It's something that will resonate with all of you, to know that the constitutional republic was formed to free and make us the greatest country on the planet. And by socializing us, it will enslave us.
Well, I know that you had made the comment that at worst it enslaves us, but actually, it does get worse than that. I mean, you can see that, even just the issue of income tax, it is supposed to be voluntary.
Yeah.
And Aaron Russo, who was the producer of America, Freedom to Fascism, among other movies like Trading Places and so forth, he had created, done a documentary talking about how he went, and he showed on film how he went to the IRS and basically confronting them about the fact that the taxes are supposed to be voluntary, because the IRS is not a government entity. It's a private institute. It's basically a collection agency for the privately owned Federal Reserve. So folks, but this is not new. This is information that Judge Anna talks about, that many people talk about. This is not new. And what we're seeing here is the battle, between these dark forces and the rest of humanity playing out right here in the United States right now. And they're losing, and it's time that they lose.
Yeah.
We know that John F. Kennedy was working with President Sukarno, who was the M1 at the time, to reconcile, to deal with create a new, you know, treasury dollar, not the fiat, not the empty debt slavery, Babylonian debt slavery, fiat dollar. These are problems, folks. These are real problems. These are real facts. These are things that they don't talk about on the mainstream media. These aren't people that are headlined in the news. These are things that go on behind the scenes, and just goes to show you that all the politicians are really, really just, puppets to do a show. Just, because they're not working for you. And they have to, as Scott said, they're taking their marching orders from the ones above them. So folks, this is the proverbial, curtain being pulled back on the yellow brick road of the gold bricks. And, it does reveal that there was, as JFK said, a plan to enslave every man, woman, and child on this planet. And I did have a quote that I wanted to share with everybody. Okay, and of course it was JFK's speech who, in 1961, informed all of us that for we are opposed around the world by a monolithic conspiracy and monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and military resources into its building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor, no secret is revealed. So this is what was JFK talking about. So folks, what I presented today, the facts I presented today, it's all historic. This is still this battle that's going on. And we wonder why JFK was assassinated. Do we really need to wonder why? So I think that what you see today is this unfolding. I think this is the force that's trying to fight President Trump right now. This is all part of the same story as this president's speech has indicated. This plot never went anywhere, other than it didn't just disappear. It progressed, it infiltrated, it continued, and it's nearly destroyed this country. So let's put our support behind our President Trump at this time and hope that he's going to eradicate the cancer on this planet and allow human beings to evolve and prosper more as we deserve to. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. I just want to say a couple of things about President Trump. In 2014, I was in Fairfield, Iowa, teaching about detoxing. And all of a sudden, the conversation became politicized. And they asked me, who's going to be the next president of the United States? And immediately, I heard St. Germain say, Donald Trump.
Mm.
And that came out of my mouth, and it freaked everybody out because a lot of the TMers are very, socialist in their viewpoints, and it was quite interesting. And I also said, I know that he has done many bad things. Every billionaire on the planet has been involved in despicable things, but he is repentant and he desires to go out of this life having done the right thing. And, sometimes that old Donald comes out and says things that, kind of shock us, but his heart is in the right place. And he is following the truth. And so just know, the midterms are coming up. My advice to you is get out and vote. That's the one thing they haven't taken away from us. That's the next thing they might take away from us. And so get out and vote with your heart. Pick the person who your heart feels, not your head, your heart, that will bring about peace on the United States. Follow the good wolf of love, compassion, and choose to feed that good wolf, like we talked about yesterday on the report. So anyway, that's all I want to say.
Well, just in closing, I wanted to say that, according to this report, this article, they had said they had accused Winston of preaching his illegal schemes to hundreds of others in paid seminars across the country and abroad. He's not just trying to rob a bank, he's actually and consistently advocating for others to rob a bank. So you tell me, why did they put the case under seal? Why did they put the case under seal? If it was all fraud, if everything Winston did was really what they said, was that that he was delusional, and that because they were outlandish, these documents and all these things he was doing was outlandish in their words, then why did they have it under seal? And quite honestly, I can assure you, just knowing Winston, I can assure you that this man had these people completely dumbfounded with probably his filings. And I'm sure they didn't want people seeing them and giving anybody else any ideas.
Yeah.
So if really Winston was a nut job, if Winston had some delusions that these things, were real when they weren't, they wouldn't have sealed the case.
Yes.
There would be nothing to hide. They only seal the case for protection.
Yep, like with Monsanto, they sealed that case. Nobody could see how bad all these things were and what they caused.
Yeah.
So the pollution continued.
It's just like the political system. I mean, we can't have something classified to save political embarrassment. That's not why we have classified documents. And sadly, that's what this FISA case is turning out to be. That these were redacted statements, but they will be published. They will be made known, and I presume they will be explosive to show that the fact that the government has, as JFK said in his speech, this has been the problem. This conspiracy, and it's a real conspiracy. It's a conspiracy based on facts.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you, I really hope and pray for Winston. I don't know Winston out of the circumstances of our reports together, but I do consider him a friend. because of all the extra times that I've needed help and have called on him. And he was always there and always willing to help people.
Yes.
And I do wish him and his family the best. And I do appreciate all of the, I'll tell you folks, it's been overwhelming, the amount of emails, letters, people have been sending me these articles. There's also been a few other Judas Iscariots on YouTube. You know, really people think they know things and they have no idea what they're talking about. They're really just empty heads talking. And, you know, with their, you know, big 600 views on their videos, you know, there's a reason for it. All right. People don't want to hear you being attacked, you know, attacking other people when you don't have, you know, you don't have access to the facts. And I'm just very disappointed that Judge Anna decided to make that public statement, really throwing Winston under the bus. And really, it just did not, it was really bad character to do that because she didn't have the facts.
Yeah.
And as far as people are concerned, you just don't you don't put something out publicly unless you have facts, unless you want to say this is your opinion. Unless you want to say, you know, this may have happened, or maybe this happened. We don't know why, but maybe this happened. I think that people were trying to exploit the fact that this maybe was under seal and exploit the fact that Winston wasn't going to be able to make a statement for himself. But, you know, we're making the statement. I'm presenting some facts. Again, Winston has no idea what I'm saying. He might even prefer I not say some of it. But,
Yeah.
you know, I'm just trying to speak from facts, from my heart. And I want people to put to rest any questions that they had about really ultimately what this is about.
Yeah.
So you know, think that it's disheartening because we haven't progressed past this point. And so many people are trying, you know, to see the, you know, silver lining behind the cloud. They're trying to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But we're still in this tunnel of darkness. And until we can eradicate the criminals on this planet, uh, there's still going to be a dark shadow cast all over us. So we need to stay in our own personal responsibility and, you know, just send your prayers. That's all you can do. And so thanks for listening. And Scott, thanks for being here with me and
You're
presenting.
welcome, and I
I
bless
appreciate
each
it.
and every one of you from the Ascended Masters. Follow your hearts.
Thanks. And so this will end um, our reports, our country road reports for now. We will continue with our POTUS reports. We will continue with our other interviews as researchers, looking at the facts, trying to understand them, trying to understand the world around us as best as we can. So thanks for viewing.